For the past 2 decades, Mini's been a bit of a niche player, but also a pretty successful one. And recently, the brand's entire lineup was renewed, including this, the Countryman. With new styling inside and out and a larger shape, has it lost that Mini magic? The new exterior of the Countryman, it's familiar, but also different. Gone is that sort of round motif that they've used for a long time with the round headlights and fog lights, and there used to be even round details put into the wheels. It's kind of gone more square, and the headlights have a more square shape to them. Even the wheels have more straight angles. If you go back here behind the rear window, there's this little square piece that's got a very Land Rover Defender feel to it with a little graphic and the all-4, letting people know that this is indeed the all-wheel drive Mini. Now, the paint here is called Smoky Green, and Mini calls this the Silver Accent Package, although I think it looks more sort of light gold or bronze or pewter. Whatever the actual names are, it doesn't matter. I really like the way the two colors come together. It just gives the car a cool look that's both fun and sophisticated. And then if you look at the front and the rear, it's pure Mini. The front grille is the same sort of grille Mini's always had, and it of course has the S badge being the S. And then in the back, it has Countryman written across the entire hatch, and of course there's the S badge there as well. And then there's 2 vertical taillights that, although they have a different design inside, they mimic sort of the classic tall Mini taillight. A bigger Mini leads to a heavier Mini, and this Countryman's about 150 pounds heavier than the old model. But thankfully, the engine more than makes up for that. So last year, the 2-liter turbo made 189 horsepower and 206 pound-feet of torque. This year, those numbers jumped to 241 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. So that's a giant increase, which is just another factor pointing to the closer relationship between the Countryman and BMW's X1. The engine is now pretty similar between the two models, which is a big bonus for this Mini. Perhaps the most confusing, unusual, I don't know what term to use, is that the 8-speed automatic, which we really liked in this vehicle, is gone, and it's replaced now by a 7-speed dual clutch. Now, BMW does make a good dual clutch, and obviously a dual clutch can react faster than an automatic, and the Mini kind of has a sporty, fun heritage. But the weird thing is, the dual clutch doesn't have any sort of manual mode or paddle shifters. You'd think if you're putting a dual clutch in, that would be almost a prerequisite, but here they're gone, and they were in the old Mini, so it's not like it's a legacy or tradition thing. They just took them out, which I find confusing. Now there's the drive modes, or drive experiences as Mini calls them, and it changes how the engine and transmission respond. But again, with no actual manual available, you'd think the automatic would at least have a manual mode, but nope. Slap in paddles aside, the engine and transmission do work really well together. It is very obvious the added power and torque. I mean, it's not quite what the old John Cooper Works JCW did, nor the new one, but it's not as far off as the old model was in contrast. And it's something I actually said the last time I drove a Countryman was, it was just a little too underpowered in the S. I got the entry level with the low power was meant for those that were just trying to save money and they didn't really care about performance, but I always felt this vehicle needed an extra 20, 30 horsepower, and instead I got over 50, and I'm very happy about it. It adds to that fun playfulness of Minis, and people will say every new generation of Mini has less actual Mini in it and more BMW, but it's not the most terrible company to be taking driving components from or tuning from their engineers. I mean, BMW still does make pretty fun cars. The dual clutch does work really well, and like I said, if you change the experiences around, go-kart mode is obviously the one that it responds the quickest, and the engine is a little more rev happy, and the sound that's pumped into the vehicle is also a little bit louder and a little more aggressive. The dual clutch, though, can't overcome the same thing that plagues every dual clutch on the market, and that is the delay from a stop. Especially when the engine start-stop happens, when you let go of the brake to leave a stop sign or stoplight, there's a momentary delay for the engine to start, and then there's a momentary delay for first gear to engage. It's not like a huge amount of time you have to wait, but it's enough just to be annoying and noticeable. going forward to reverse or reverse to forward, especially pretty quickly, that's where the real delay happens. And it can almost be up to a second, which is a lot when you're expecting instantaneous response or you're trying to make a maneuver amongst traffic. But really, I can't say enough about how flexible this engine is and how much it transforms the Countryman. Not only does it make it go faster, I think Mini says it'll go 0 to 60 in about 6.2 seconds, all the way up to 150 miles per hour, another nod to its German roots. It just makes the vehicle feel more premium. A luxury vehicle never really makes a driver want for power. That's part of the premium experience, is you got comfort and luxury and power and performance, and you just get everything. And this feels more like that. I don't think it's quite a BMW Mercedes competitor, but that's not really what it's going for. It's going for a very different, very youthful market. The crazy thing is this larger, heavier, far more powerful Mini Countryman is actually more fuel efficient. It gets 1 mile per gallon better fuel economy compared to the outgoing model, or officially 24 miles per gallon city and 32 highway. Again, for the performance this vehicle has, that's pretty impressive fuel economy considering this isn't a hybrid. As I mentioned on the outside, this comes with the larger wheel and tire package. Ultimately, I can't really test it out because it is on winter tires, but the steering feel is still pretty decent. And like I said, you get into the more aggressive drive modes and it firms up, which doesn't necessarily add more feeling, but it allows for better precision when steering. Body roll, yeah, it's present. This is a crossover SUV after all, but it still rides a bit on the harder side overall. It's pretty compliant, especially compared to other Minis, but compared to other little SUVs in its class, it's definitely got that sportier side, which leads to a stiffer suspension. Now, there is an adjustable suspension, but I don't have that in my specific tester. So again, I can't really make any comments on ultimate handling and capabilities. What I can sort of feel and I have observed is this is a little more neutral than a lot of SUVs. If you trail brake it into a corner or even just hustle it into a corner anyway, the front end's more willing to turn with the rear end more willing to follow it. It's not a sports car. There's SUVs that do handle better, but the whole way the thing's set up with a bit of body roll, the engine sounds, the transmission performance, the steering, it's just, as I keep saying, this sort of playful persona, which Minis have always had, and it may not be quite as fun as it used to be, but it's traded in a little bit of that playfulness for a whole lot of funkiness inside the vehicle. So the most noticeable thing when you get inside is the center screen. It has slowly been transitioning through the generations of Minis into a display digital screen, and now it is massive and is fully digital. It's kind of cool that it's a round, full digital screen. In front of the driver remains a head-up display, and it bounces off of a flip-up piece of plastic, but they've done it so well here. It almost feels like I have another display in front of me. It's so clear and it's so large. It's just well integrated, and of course it's adjustable to make sure it's at the right level for the person driving. Back to the center screen. So depending on those different drive experiences, different things will be displayed by default, but every single one you can have a full gauge setup with speedometer, RPM, charge, fuel, all that. In its sort of default home, it has digital speed on the top, fuel economy on one side, clock on the other with a date. There's constant climate controls at either bottom corner, one for the passenger, one for the driver, and then at the very bottom there's the row of the usual buttons to get to the home screen. So that means everything for the audio system, climate control, and all that is controlled through the display screen, which I'm not a big fan of, but at least this Mini screen is pretty responsive to touch and it's pretty quick to react. I'd still prefer more hard buttons though. And that's the thing, Mini was always known for having this cool row of toggle switches, and now below the screen there's technically 3 toggle switches, but one's the gear selector and another is the experience changer, and then in the middle looks like a toggle, but it's actually a twist, and that's to start and stop the vehicle. So it has push button, but it still lets you crank like a key. Just another one of those little funky touches. Safe to say the center stack looks like nothing else on the road, and there are a few hard buttons at the bottom to get to the home menu, to see your parking cameras, and then of course defrost. Below that, there's a wireless phone charger, and then below that's another cubby for storage. So continuing down the center of the interior, there's 2 cup holders, and then this weird little box thing that has a pull tab, and it opens up, and it's like a little storage box. I mean, it can't move, and it's not huge. It's also not small. I guess you could hide keys or wallets in there. I think it's just Mini trying to have another unique aspect to the interior. The armrest slides back and forth, and both it and the one on the door are pretty comfortable. And speaking of the door, yes, let's talk about this pattern that goes around the entire cabin. So it's part of the iconic trim, or Preferred Plus in Canada, and it starts with this classic mini brown, and then it kind of pixelate blends into this bluey green teal sort of color around the entire dash, and then on the other door it pixelates back to brown, and in the rear seats it's finished in the brown. So the materials and design actually continues to the rear doors, which isn't always the case, so that's kind of cool. And then the vents that are slit in amongst them also have some style. Like, you can totally tell there wasn't an aspect of this interior that Mini didn't try to add some style to, or didn't think through how it was going to look, instead of just slapping basic black plastic on things. A larger vehicle, of course, leads to larger dimensions inside. Up front, there's over 40 inches of headroom and legroom, but it's in the rear where things are more accommodating. There's 39.1 inches of headroom and 37 inches of legroom. This means 2 full-size adults can fit back there without trouble, and the somewhat boxy shape of the Countryman leads to having great sightlines for even rear seat passengers. The extra space is also filled in the cargo area, which can now hold almost 25 cubic feet of gear, which expands to 57 cubic feet when the rear seats are folded down. So, actual comfort, the front seat is quite nice. It's very adjustable, power operated just like the passenger seat, and I found a good driving position almost immediately. Rear seats too, they're pretty good, much better than the old Countryman, and when you open up the moonroof cover, it adds just even more headroom, but since the roof's already kind of flat and squared off, there's good headroom back there to begin with. Alright, so let's talk pricing. In the US, the new Mini Countryman S starts at a price of just under $40,000, including destination charges. As equipped in this model, it ends up being just under $45,000. So that has it just barely undercut the Mercedes GLA 250 4MATIC and the Alfa Romeo Tonale with the regular gas turbo all-wheel drive. For our Canadian viewers, it starts at $48,500, give or take a couple dollars, and ends up just a hair over $57,000 as equipped. So how does it come equipped? Well, this is the Ioniq trim version of the Cooper S in the US, or Preferred Plus in Canada. It has the 20-inch wheels like I've mentioned, the smoky green exterior with those silvery gold accents, and inside it has the Comfort Max package. The old cliches of the Mini not being so mini anymore are pretty old and tired, but with this vehicle, it kind of applies. The new Countryman is the largest Mini ever made, and it's lost a little bit of that Mini driving feel, but gained a lot of German driving feel, so that could be a good or bad thing depending on your perspective. Inside though, it's full Mini. It's a car that is vibrant and here to have fun. So for youthful buyers, or those who are youthful at heart, I'd recommend giving this new Countryman a look.